This is a really cool and borderline disturbing story that happened to my friends and me a couple of years ago. We all live in Nevada, but every fall we fly to New York to hike some of the trails, specifically up in the Adirondack mountain area. If none of you have ever seen autumn in New York, it's very worth it. The sights are beautiful. Breathtaking, really, is the word that comes to mind. I know a lot of people where we live think of New York City every time we say that we're going to New York, and they don't realize that the state is kind of big, and most of the state is mountains and forests. Basically, do yourself a favor and check it out, especially if you're a fan of nature and the outdoors. The Adirondacks are a must. My friend Luis always plans the hikes for us every year. He's one of those strange types of people who could live off the land, be stranded in the elements, and survive relatively easily. We trust Luis. He's safe, he's thorough, and he hasn't led us into danger yet, and we've been doing these hikes and camping trips for over a decade now. And this year was no different. We got to our cabin and spent the first night going over the map and trail that Luis had planned out. It seemed like a straightforward trip. Sometimes Luis liked to really challenge us. This year, though, he wanted to enjoy the sights and not worry about the difficulty of the terrain. We started early in the next morning, and we were navigating the woods and taking pictures of all the amazing sights. And during our hike, Luis took us a little off course because he said that he could see something up ahead that kind of didn't look natural. I've seen enough horror movies to know that when somebody says something like that, it usually means no bueno. A few yards off, of course, we stumbled upon a very old structure. It became clear right away that it was some sort of old church. I can say that confidently because the building had a big steeple and a cross on top of that steeple. And if you ask me, that's a dead giveaway for a church. And even though we were surrounded by beautiful sights, this was somehow the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. We were deep in the woods, and not in the areas that people hike typically. The fact that a building like this was in the woods and in the condition that it was truly amazing. After a bunch of pictures, we went inside the church, and I'm doubling down by saying that this was the coolest thing I'd ever seen with my own eyes. It was like stepping into a time machine. Inside the church were several rows of wooden benches that led to a small wooden altar at the back of the church. I remember seeing a giant wooden cross, and there were candles everywhere. Obviously, the candles were burned down to nothing, and there was wax all over the wooden floorboards of the church. On the floor in between one of the benches was an old Bible. It was so old that you couldn't even see what the words said anymore. And to this day, I still have that Bible on my bookshelf because it was an awesome conversation starter that obviously leads to this story. We hung around inside of the church for a while, just sort of taking in the awe of the situation. We talked about possible conclusions about who used the church, but every answer we came up with still made no sense, mainly because there wasn't anything else near the church, at least nothing that we could find. No other buildings, or even remnants of buildings. And while we were hanging around the church, Louise noticed something weird. Behind the altar were a couple of floorboards that sounded sort of different than the other ones that we were walking on. Louise moved the wooden altar out of the way to reveal 2 hinges. And this amazing discovery of ours was about to get even cooler. Not only did we find a church in the middle of nowhere, but we now had found a weird door in the floor of that church. We shone our lights down into the hole, but it just looked like a dark and dusty hole in the earth. We could see the dirty ground, and I would guess it was most likely 8 feet down. I got on my stomach and practically was hanging into the hole. I wasn't sure, but I thought that I could see paintings or something on the wall. Without giving my friends any chance to decide, I just jumped inside and simultaneously told them that I wanted to check it out. And what a sight to behold once I was down there. There were indeed paintings all over the walls. They appeared to be stone walls, but I'm not an expert. The paintings were nothing of note that I could tell. Symbols of weird things that I can't really describe. Nothing really offensive, and it didn't look like any sort of language that I could recognize, which isn't saying too much. I'm sure that it was religious symbology, but I'm not religious, so I have no idea. While I was mesmerized by the weird symbols, my eyes were directed to the back of the dark square room. There was a small boarded-up hole in the wall. It was an intentionally boarded-up hole with wooden planks and nails. I was shouting to my friends what I was seeing as I was going, and I told them that I was going to break the boards down and see what was in there. I could hear Louise screaming up above me, but I just sort of ignored him. I ripped the planks down and shone my light in the hole. It was as dark as my light could see. The weirdest part was the heat coming from the hole. It was legitimately warmth coming out of that hole. It was a little too tight for me to crawl into, so unfortunately I never got to see any further. Our lights were powerful too, and the fact that it was just continued darkness is what really amazed me. Once my friends pulled me back up, they each took a turn inspecting the hole in the wall, and we felt like explorers. This was the first time in all the years that we went hiking that I felt emotions like this. We eventually decided to finish our hike, and when we got back to the cabin, Louise informed some park rangers or someone like that about the church and what we found. The ranger said that we went way off course, even though Louise disagreed with him. The ranger told Louise that the hole supposedly led to some collapsed mine from a long time ago. He said the hole in the wall eventually gets tighter if you crawl through it, and it becomes too much of a hazard, and that's probably why it was blocked off. We tried doing more research about the area, and we found some info, but nothing that gave us direct answers. There were mines in the area, so it does make sense. Either way, this was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, and the more we thought about it, the more unnerving the story became, though. What if people were down there when it collapsed? Why did the church have to have a path to the mines anyways? There was just so many questions. But what do you think? Do you really think it was some sort of mine entrance or something else entirely?
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. It was the time when our school had planned a summer camp trip, which was supposed to be held at Blackwood Campground in Mount Desert, Maine. Even though I was unwilling to go there, my parents still sent me. They packed entire luggage for me, which includes food, beverages, clothing, categorized different activities, etc. My parents came to the school to see me off, which felt embarrassing to me. But after seeing some other parents as well, I felt a bit relieved. But I had the biggest luggage among all, and as I was the school nerd, so other kids started to make fun of me. The kids in our school was also divided into different groups: the rich kids, the cool kids, the geeks, the nerds, and the ones whom no one takes notice of. There was a guy amongst the cool kids, Noah, whom I had a major crush on. It was not because he was cool or something, but because he never made fun of me. And even when his friends would make fun of me, he would simply change the topic to something else to distract them from making fun of me. He never talked with me or made eye contact with me, but I had a feeling buried deep inside which said he liked me. I often used to daydream about me, but never let anyone find out about it. I used to sit on the third seat from the starting second row, and he used to sit on the last row among his friends. And sometimes during the class, I would steal a few glances of him in which he would either be sleeping or gossiping with his friends. I never once saw him focusing on the class. Every time I looked at him, my heart would start beating uncontrollably. "Wasn't there a bigger luggage for you to bring, Portia?" Miss Geller, who was one of the teachers assigned to watch over the summer camp, said to me jokingly, which made everyone present there to laugh. I felt so embarrassed that I wanted to dig my grave right there and hide inside it. But I quietly got on the bus and went there to sit on my seat. "Move it, nerd. This seat is reserved for Noah and me." As I was about to sit, a girl pushed me from behind, sat in one of the seats while putting her bag on the other. I looked at her for a few seconds, but then went ahead and sat on the only empty seat left, which was behind Miss Portia. Everyone was laughing, playing games, singing, and talking during the ride, enjoying it, while I was the only one sitting alone looking at everyone. I was feeling so out of place, which was making me feel awkward. So I took out a book that I had brought for just a time like this. We reached the camp and the activities started. During the activities, no one was ready to pair up with me except for the kids who no one cared about, and they all looked like they did not care if anyone gave a damn about them. I couldn't help but notice that Noah was behaving differently than usual. I saw him snickering when other kids was bullying, and making fun of me, which stabbed like a sharp knife in my heart. I was feeling disturbed due to his indifferent behavior during the entire camp. I wanted to talk to him about it, but I wasn't able to gather enough courage for it. On the last day of summer camp, I made up my mind to talk to him no matter what. The last activity we were supposed to do was rock climbing, and I decided to talk to him before that. And it's not like I didn't talk at all. I did talk to him just briefly, and the teacher called us for our turns after that. I was the first one to go, and Noah was supposed to climb after me, but I denied because I wasn't feeling well and sat near a rock and started to watch them. When Noah had climbed more than halfway down, his rope along with safety rope suddenly broke altogether and he fell down. Those who were climbing along with him tried to help, but it was too late. Noah did not die from the fall, but he sustained many serious and permanent injuries. Everyone was trying to figure out how is that possible even after so many safety gears and precautions involved at the site. As they were taking him to the emergency, I was somehow feeling relieved. It was the last night on the camp when I saw the same girl who pushed me on the bus making out with him, which made me extremely furious and disgusted towards Noah. That was when, out of the rage, I sneakily cut all the ropes, carefully knowing that Noah's turn would be the fifth one. I did not cut it completely, instead in the way which only breaks after 4 kids' turns were passed, and I did it after the advanced safety checkups so no one would suspect me. But I thought of telling him to stop if he were to explain the situation positively to me. And when I went to talk to him, he brushed me off, saying I always disgusted him and I was never worth his time. After hearing those words from him, I felt such hatred towards him that I had never felt before. So I decided to let things be. Noah's hands and legs were badly fractured, and he also sustained some injuries on his head. His parents wanted to sue the teachers for being careless, but somehow the whole matter was cooled down. It was found out that someone had cut the ropes in advance, but because no one saw me, and there was no surveillance camera installed at the time, no one was able to find who the culprit was. The problem kids were questioned, but as I had skillfully played the role of a pitiful kid who was always bullied, no one suspected me even a bit. I still feel a bit guilty of Noah's condition, but not that much to feel remorseful for my entire life. The summer was the start of me taking a step forward to the life of crimes.
Growing up, my favorite thing in the world was going fishing with my 2 older brothers. We lived in a very rural area and would often hike out into the woods to go to various creeks to go fishing. We never really caught anything big in the creeks, but it wasn't as much about what we caught as much as it was about spending time with your brothers fishing. Stereotypically, we always got up way early in the morning on fishing day. We would begin hiking out to whichever creek we were going to and would watch the sun as it stole across the sky. It would be fully light outside as we got to where we were headed to. The scariest thing to ever happen on a fishing trip, of course, happened the first time that we had gotten to a new creek. We had set out that morning, determined to go further into the hills than we normally did. We passed by 1 or 2 of our regular fishing spots and kept going deeper and deeper into the woods. We found an absolutely amazing spot. It was thickly wooded, but the creek was huge. It was beautiful and even had a fallen tree stretched out over it. After we determined that it was sturdy enough, the 3 of us made our way over to the other side of the creek. We sat our stuff out and began to fish. The day wore on, and we weren't really catching anything. The fishing got boring after a bit, so we decided to do something we normally didn't do. Like I said, the creek was huge and it was quite deep too, so we decided to put aside our fishing poles and go swimming in the creek. I really don't know how long we had been swimming when I noticed that our middle brother stopped doing anything and began staring off in the woods. Our oldest brother asked him what was wrong, and he just motioned to the woods. "There's someone out in the woods, watching us," he said. My first thought was that some pervert was out there watching us, but when I followed my brother's finger pointing out towards the woods, those thoughts quickly evaporated. Standing off in the trees was a huge man. It wasn't too dark that we couldn't make out some of his features. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, which struck me as odd as it was pretty warm out. He had a baseball cap on his head that was sitting low over his face. But the most striking feature he had was that he was holding what looked to be a rifle or shotgun in his hand. We weren't sure what to do. Going into the woods, we knew that we were trespassing. We never actually knew whose property we were on, but we did know that the places that we hiked and fished on didn't belong to us. Except up until this point, we had never gotten caught before. Both of us younger boys looked at our brother for instruction as to what to do. He seemed just as worried as we did, though, and didn't give us any direction. He just kept looking at the man standing there and watched. My brother suggested we try and get ourselves over to our stuff, take it, and leave. However, this was daunting because that was the side of the creek the guy was on. We slowly made our way over to our things. However, before we got to shore, an old hag came running out of the woods, shrieking like a freaking banshee. I got startled and fell back into the water, struggling until my middle brother pulled me back up again. The old nasty woman actually ran over to our things, our poles, and our clothes. She started grabbing the things and screaming, "Mine, mine, mine, mine!" She was gathering all of our things in her arms, dropping a few of them when she had too much in her arms. "Yay, stop that!" my oldest brother yelled, and began to try and move faster to the shore. My middle brother reached out and put his hand on his shoulder and pointed back to the big guy in the woods. When we moved back towards the shore, he began moving closer, and he held the gun up as he walked. "Holy shit!" I distinctly remember yelling. "We're sorry we trespassed on your property," my middle brother shouted, but they didn't pay any attention to us. "He's not gonna shoot us," my oldest brother said, and began moving towards the old hag to get his things. As he did, though, the old woman saw him, and she took a fillet knife out of her pocket and started waving it at my brother. "I'll cut you!" she screamed at him, her arms still overflowing with our things. By now the big hillbilly was by the shore of the creek, and he had the shotgun cocked and was pointing it at my oldest brother. He, of course, stopped in his tracks. It was a tense moment as we stood cold in the water with this guy pointing his gun right in our faces. Once the woman had gathered up our clothes and fishing gear in her hands, the guy said one thing to us: "Get." We didn't have to be told twice. All three of us swam to the other side of the creek, got out of the water, and got out of there. It sucks because we had to walk through the woods in nothing but soaked shorts. We didn't even have shoes, and the twigs and rocks and leaves hurt our feet, but we were too scared to even consider going back. We fortunately did not get chewed out for losing our stuff. Our dad told us that there are some messed up people out in the woods, and we had to be careful. It was a long time, though, before we were brave enough to go fishing again. I am now a 72-year-old man. This happened long ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland, circa 1969 or 1970. Just say my life at the time was in disarray. I had dropped out of college. My father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move to an isolated cabin, to live in contemplation and solitude, was welcome. I had some inheritance money to pay for it. To the best of my memory, I was there 8 to 9 months. No TV, but books and radio. I had a library card, and I can't remember if I even had a phone. The story begins when, a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog, and I took her in. Never could train her to do anything, but I fed her, and she was a sweet, if not the brightest, dog. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the isolated cabin. Hard to describe, but I felt like someone was watching. On many occasions, I thought someone might even be looking into my cabin window, watching us. The next phase was the shadowing or following. I knew the folks a half-mile down the lane, woods all around, and would sometimes visit them at night. Something was waiting for me, and followed closely in the woods beside me in the darkness. You could hear it easily, footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. This not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited, and to friends, and it spooked them big time. At night, it was out there around the cabin. And here's the funny thing. I was never afraid, never felt threatened. Not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I spent a good bit of time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There was a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for mile after mile. The whole of western Maryland was much more country than it is now. None of the development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and I, we came across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods, traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked slept in, garbage, food and drink, paper, what have you. Perhaps hunters, but much of it did not have the organized feel that you would get from experienced hunters. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe he sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch screened with a light door and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard with woods close by either side. Dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds, then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day, like they were offerings. I had to grab them up before the dog ate them, and this went on almost daily for several weeks. One night, very late, I was awoken by some sound. I lay in bed and heard something from the front porch. I hopped up and hit the lights, and I saw that hound dog who never learned to sit or stay, standing at the front door in a perfect pointer position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked. I heard the door slam and footsteps down the steps. I hit the spotlight but saw nothing. I went out. He had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more. The animal offerings got bigger and bigger. Larger birds, a possum, a woodchuck. It really wasn't funny. The final 2 gifts were legs, either from horses or even cows. Big and bloody. One was skinned, dear God. And the second to last day, the dog left me. I could hear her in the woods howling on a trail following a scent. I looked for her in every way I could. Came up in the following weeks, but to no avail. She left as she came. I moved back to Maryland's suburbs of D.C., got an apartment with a friend, got a job, and moved on with my life. One day, not long after, I picked up the Washington Post, and there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville monster. It's described as a tall, yeti-like creature, fur-covered, on 2 legs that would pick out a family or person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. That attention, described in the article, was exactly what had happened to me. Following you at night, looking inside the house, gifts, and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot or Yeti, I might still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville, Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick, and back then, many folks knew how to live in the woods. They grew up that way, country folks. I think the monster was actually an escaped patient, or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. This is like all the homeless you see in the cities now, probably off his meds, but somehow functional and just lonely. He would pick people or families to adopt, so to speak. The camps in the woods could have been him. Nothing to do, he would make mischief. I think he liked me, but sensed that I was leaving. Now, I can't prove any of this, it's just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and his behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I don't think he could have survived until the 1980s. Deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelter of hospitals. Unprotected, the mentally ill do die, but once in a while, they find their way to you.